Now, let's test and explain how the amplifier works. Our smartphone is connected to the DIN module and is playing some music. If you look at your Lectron circuit in front of you, you can see that current can flow through the preamplifier, but also through the end amplifier. Now, to measure these currents, we need a multimeter. This multimeter can measure voltages and currents. These are the connections for the probes. Let us start with the black probe, which is the ground. This white probe has a detachable 4mm plug. This plug can be inserted in the black connection of our multimeter. This is the ground. The other end of 2mm we will connect to the connection module at the left of our circuit. Now the ground is connected. Let's move these wires a bit aside. So, to measure the voltages or currents, we need another wire. So we will use a red wire now. This red wire has to be inserted in our multimeter. So we need the detachable plug of 4mm. We will insert it in the red connection of our multimeter. Now, the other end of the wire needs a measurement probe, so we will use the blue one. This blue probe has a very thin metal plate which can easily be inserted between two adjacent blocks without breaking up the circuit. So let's use it to measure. We will set our multimeter to DC setting, about 20 volts. We will use this probe to test different voltages across our circuit. First we have the first amplifier, the second amplifier and the third amplifier. We will also measure the voltage across the voltage divider here, the base emitter junction of the first transistor, the base emitter junction of the second transistor. We also measure the halfway voltage here and the third amplifier of the third transistor, the base emitter junction also. So, now let's power up the circuit by placing the ground cube to the minus of the battery. Now, let's turn up the volume a bit so we can hear the music through our speaker. Right, this should be enough. Okay, now we will use the test probe first to test the voltage of our battery. This should be about 9 volts. Alright, let's move on to the voltage divider here, and the voltage should be reduced. This is about 8.6 volts. Now let's move on to the first amplifier. This is the first transistor in a circuit. It gets its voltages across a 4.7K resistor. We measure the collector, and this should be about 1.30. Now let's move to the base emitter junction. This should be about 0.6 volts. You see. So now when we move to the second transistor, now the base emitter junction should be also about 0.6 volts. It gets it by the 100K resistor. We will measure it, and this is also about 0.6 volts. Okay, let's measure now the collector of the second transistor. Voltage is about 4.6 volts. This is about half the voltage of our battery. Let's move on to the third transistor. The base emitter junction should be about also 0.6 volts. This is the emitter. And now when we measure the base, you see the difference is also about 0.6 volts. If we would measure now the connection between the two transistors and the speaker, we will see that this voltage is about 4.7 volts, which is a half of 9 volts our battery. So we can say when the two transistors are conducting equally. This resistor makes the third transistor conduct, and this resistor the second transistor. So the speaker is sitting at medium voltage. It can swing up or down, following the input. Let's turn it up a bit. We will continue now with measuring currents in a circuit. We will measure the current through the preamplifier, through the end amplifier and also the whole circuit. So, we have to change the probe here. We plug it in the current connection of our multimeter. We set it to current setting, about 20 milliamperes, which should be sufficient. So, we don't need this anymore, we need another plug to test. We will use a special Lectron cube. It has two connections at the side and at the top. So this block can be placed between two blocks and break up the circuit. So we will measure current. We will plug the test lead here and this make connection to the side. Now we remove the ground connection of the preamplifier and we use this one instead. Now the circuit will be working. It will measure the currents across the preamplifier. Now let's move on to the end amplifier. So we will place the ground connection back, and now this time we remove this ground connection and we place the block back again. So now we measure the current through the end amplifier. Now we will measure the current through the whole circuit. So we remove the test cube and replace it with the ground cube. So our circuit is working back again. Now we need to add a probe here. This probe is the negative probe of our multimeter. So we plug it here. Now we can place this block between two blocks and the current will be measured. We will use the positive voltage here. And you see the total current is about 9 milliamperes, which is not so much for the whole circuit. But also the volume is not so loud. Just adjusting here a bit. Okay. Now let's enjoy the music a bit. The quality of the speaker has been improved. I've replaced the original speaker with a better one. So the sound quality is much better. Perhaps an idea for you too. Thank you very much for watching and perhaps till later.